Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan, and again, thank you for joining us for another free podcast. This podcast is free on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, as well as our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. We are pleased to have an outstanding children's author in Stacy Leicht. She was born in Dearborn, Michigan. She grew up loving animals, nature, and books. She worked as an elementary school teacher and a literary curriculum facilitator for 15 years before becoming an adjunct professor and then a supervisor in the education department at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. Stacy lives with her husband, Rick, and their rescued dog, Bella, in North Carolina. She and Rick have 2 grown children, and Stacy treasures time with her 2 grandchildren and loves reading, baking, and snorkeling at the beach. Stacy, you have quite a great resume there. Welcome to Magical Books for Kids.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
First of all, I got to ask you this. How many times do you go snorkeling at the beach? And
We've actually gone quite a bit. We enjoy going to the beach, and for many of our larger anniversaries, we try to go to the beach, and we'll go to the Caribbean or places like that and try to snorkel in places that locals will tell us to go to see some of the more beautiful fish.
It's amazing because that's something I always wanted to do, but I have this fear of going underwater. So when did you first start snorkeling?
Oh, goodness. I think the first time I ever did it, I was probably in high school and didn't really go anywhere where there were really tropical fish. We were just in Florida and saw some pretty fish, but they certainly weren't quite as colorful as maybe the Caribbean or in even Hawaii. But I practiced in the Florida Gulf where my mom and dad had a house for a while, and got a little bit more proficient in snorkeling before I felt comfortable doing it in the bigger seas.
Well, that's amazing you did it in the Gulf too. So how was that experience compared to the beach itself?
We have to get used to the waves coming up and hitting you a little bit, and just trying to breathe correctly, and I think there's a little bit of a you have to be patient and you have to breathe slow, but it's very calming, and it's really kind of beautiful to just look around and see all that God has created below you. So that's the most important thing to me, is just looking around and seeing everything that you normally don't get to see when you're in a boat above the water. There's just this beautiful universe underneath you that you don't get to see normally, and it's beautiful.
It's quite an extraordinary world. I mean, I've only seen it from a TV, like the Discovery Channel. I'll watch that a lot and everything like that. I would certainly panic being under the water for a certain amount of time. But welcome to Magical Books for Kids. You have a wonderful book out, as well as a suspense novel that will come out next year. First, let's talk about you as a child. Were there any particular books that you loved, or a particular author? For me, it was all sports books. So I'm sure you were a little bit more diverse than I was growing up as a child.
Some of my favorites were the Laura Ingalls Wilder sets. I just love the Little House on the Prairie novels. I read them cover to cover, and I read every single one in the set. And I just had to make sure I read the entire series. Another favorite for me was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the original one. I loved that one and read it over and over again. I loved every part of the imagery that was involved in the story. Plus, I just liked a happy ending. I think part of that was just the happy ending of that one.
Yeah, who doesn't love a happy ending? I mean, that's what I read the books for sure.
Exactly.
Yes. So,
yeah.
You have 2 grown children. When they were younger, did you read to them often? And did they have a favorite book that they wanted to read? I know my kids they would fixate on one particular book, and you'd have to read it over and over and over and over again. So how were your children growing up? And do they have a love for reading?
Yeah, so as a teacher, I really tried to instill that love of reading. So I started reading to them when they were just, 6 months old, 8 months old, holding them in my arms, reading to them, which we started doing with our granddaughter. And fortunately, her parents did with her too. So yeah, they both, I would say my daughter a little bit more than my son, loved reading, still loves reading. And she loved like the Babysitters Club stories. She read that whole series. She read all of the Laura Ingalls Wilder series, just like I did, because I shared those with her. Um, but any set she could get her hands on. She was a person who loved a series. She always loved knowing that there was something else coming.
Yeah.
And she loved having a cliffhanger. And she's still like that, very much so. And so I had a little bit harder time getting my son involved. He was someone like you. He liked the sports stories and things like that. And then there was a series that came out called the Michigan Chillers and American Thrillers. I don't know if you remember those, but that came out in the let's say I think it was the early 2000s.
Okay.
And he was born in 94. So about first grade, second grade, he really got into that series. And it was the first time that he really got into reading and read a whole series and just couldn't put them down. So my mama heart, my teacher heart was super happy to see him jumping in and loving reading. And now he reads all the time. He's getting a PhD. Yeah, so he does research. He's all about reading now.
Yeah, it's interesting because our oldest daughter was born in 94 as well.
Okay, yeah.
And our youngest was 97. The youngest loves to read, prolific reader as well. The oldest, she loves Japanese, reading about anime and things like that. And she was reading all these Japanese books. So whatever gets you to read, I think is the important thing. I think that I finally taught that lesson to my parents. They finally said, all right, he's going to read, but he'll read these books because that's all he wants to read. And it allowed me to be comfortable with the particular subjects because it made me love to read more by reading about that stuff. And then I followed up on other books. I became engulfed with Charles Dickens. I loved his stories. Became fascinated with A Christmas Carol, that Oliver Twist. I mean, that's how you do it. If you teach your kids to read with love, they love it, then you're home free on that. So that was great. But you're a teacher as well, and you were an elementary school teacher. How was that, teaching kids in elementary school?
I loved it. I guess that's why I'm still a teacher. So I taught elementary for about 19 years, and then when we moved to North Carolina, loved it, absolutely loved it. And I thought I would teach elementary when we moved to North Carolina, but we moved here right before the school year started. And it was so close to the school year starting, there was literally no elementary positions open at that time. So a middle school principal called me and said, hey, want to try middle school. And I was panicked. I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know about this. But I ended up really enjoying it after I kind of figured myself out. I had to, you can't change kids. You have to change yourself to work with kids. So I had to figure out what I needed to do differently, going from third grade to sixth grade. And then I loved it. And then I did curriculum work for a while before going on to UNCG. But I find myself still training kids to love reading because we just did a study on a book called The Book Whisperer, where the teacher is trying to teach her little children, how to love reading. And so I had my juniors and seniors in college read this book. And what I'm finding is that juniors and seniors in college, if you ask them if they love reading, their answer most of the time is no. They just feel like they have to do it for their coursework. So it was my goal this year to get them to learn to love reading. So I had them doing read alouds in class, and I did read alouds with children's books so that they would enjoy listening to books. And I think it started to work. Which was fun.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, it's about loving to read. And if you love to read, then you're home. You're home free at that point.
Yeah,
So
and they're going to be future teachers. So I told them, listen, if
exactly.
you don't love it yourself, you're not going to be able to get the little ones around you to love it.
And we all remember our favorite teachers. Okay, I
Yeah,
still remember
absolutely.
mine. Yeah, I still remember mine. Third grade, Miss Bittner. I was like, I fell in love. It was my first love. Fell in love, and she could tell me anything, and I do it. You know,
Yeah,
that's
love
the
it.
thing. Yeah, yeah, because she took the time to make me understand that you can love reading. So that was wonderful. So let's talk about your book. I have it in
Okay.
front of me as well. Good One God. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when I read the title, I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be humor certainly involved in this particular story. And I've looked through it and everything. It's about a story about Kelsey, and the illustrations are beautiful, very, very picturesque, this particular book. Let's first talk about the idea behind it. Wow, how did the idea come about for this particular book? Good One Gods, written
Yeah.
by Stacy Leicht.
Yeah. So the book actually came to me after a conversation I had with my son, who was about 8 years old at the time. And I was driving him early in the morning to hockey practice when we lived in Michigan. And he was the goalie, so he had to be there early for goalie practice, which was the norm. And so I was doing the mom thing where you're pointing out the beautiful thing in nature around you, and pointing out the beautiful trees or the beautiful flowers. And so a lot of times I would be pointing out beautiful things because I thought it would be something that I would want my son to also appreciate, not just my daughter, because he was really into sports, but I wanted him to learn an appreciation for things as well.
Mhm.
And so that particular morning, a beautiful sunrise was occurring in front of our eyes with purples and oranges and pinks. And it was really one of the most stunning sunrises I had ever seen. And I just really wanted him to see it. And he was kind of sleepy sitting in the passenger seat next to me. And I said, Zach, are you awake? And he said, yeah, I'm awake. And I said, you got to look at the sunrise. So he kind of got up out of his slouchy position and started looking at the sunrise with me out the window as we were driving. And, the colors were changing as they do with the wind, as the blowing around. And we started noticing it was just like art. God was creating this artwork in front of us. And so we were talking about it, and he had his face pressed up to the window, and we were quiet, not talking for a minute. And he just said, "Good one, God." And he was giving God the credit for this beautiful sunrise.
Oh,
And my mama heart just swelled up, and I just was like, oh, I've never heard such sweet words come out of my son's mouth. And I looked at him and I said, oh my goodness, I love that phrase. That is such a great phrase, giving God the glory in such a great way. And it became something that we talked about in our family. And we used the phrase over and over. If there was something that happened, even if the kids, passed a calc test later in life, we'd say, good one, God, thanks for helping them get through a calc test, or whatever it was in life, we gave God glory by using that phrase. And
yeah,
so,
yeah. That was, the interesting part is you just mentioned, it just struck me and resonated with me. Here is a child really putting it into proper perspective.
yeah,
And here I am, an adult. Okay, I'm thinking about like my day, like something happened to me, and I go, good with God. Yeah, I know, I get it. Not things aren't going to be so easy. But you just gave it another perspective from a child's viewpoint.
yes.
And that's how your title of book, Good One God, is. I'm sorry to have interrupted you. I just needed to get that thought to you. It's like, wow, what a brilliant thought by your young son.
Yeah, yeah. So it took me a while. In that moment, I didn't really think it should be a book, but I let it marinate for quite some time. And finally I thought, this really should be a book. And then I took some ideas of times where my dad and my mom would take my kids fishing. And I thought it would be a nice legacy to create a book that had some of the memories of when my parents would take my kids fishing, and then use that phrase and just kind of weave it all together into a book. So that's how it all came to be.
Now, did you, before it was published, did you share the story with your son and your daughter? And what
I
was
did, yeah.
what were their reactions?
They liked it very much. And of course, my son's competitive side came out because in the story, my son is the first one to say, "Good one, God," when they see something that's
Mhm.
beautiful. And my daughter, he keeps interrupting my daughter, and she, unfortunately, he keeps beating her to the punch. And so she gets a little frustrated in the story. That's the conflict in the story. Um,
Oh, okay.
so she's a little frustrated because she really wants to say it too. And granddad has taught them to say, "Good one, God," when they see something beautiful. So the kids kind of make it a game to say, "Good one, God," when they see in the story, they see some herons and they see some diamondback terrapin turtles and they see other beautiful things in nature that they keep seeing throughout the day. And so every time they see something, Kelsey's the one who wants to say it, but Zach beats her to it. And so she finally gets to the end of the day, wondering if she'll get a chance to say, "Good one, God." And then you have to get to the end of the story to find out if she gets to.
Yeah, that's right. You have to read it and everything and observe all the
Yeah.
beautiful illustrations, which is done by Jessica Harkey.
Yeah, Jessica
Yeah.
Harkey is the daughter of a good friend of mine, and she graduated from SCAD and in Savannah with a children's illustration degree, and she's fabulous.
Yeah, this is a book I think that because children are they're unfiltered, but for adults, we're spending a lot of time worrying about obviously paying bills, things like that. We get caught up in our day and we're outside or we're doing something and we're rushing to get to Target to get this or that or do Christmas shopping or whatever, Thanksgiving dinner. And we're not taking the time to observe the beauty that's around us. That's and it's as I said, it resonated with me that I haven't done that lately. I haven't taken the time. Here I am in Florida. On one side is the Gulf, on the other side is the Atlantic Ocean, and I haven't taken the time to go to the beach since I've been down.
Yeah.
I've been down here for 3 years, and I haven't really been to. Well, that's right. I have been. I've been to Clearwater, but I haven't been a lot. I've been there like 4 days. Okay, it's 3 years, 4 days and 3 years. I've been to the beach, and I
Yeah.
haven't taken the time and watch more sunsets, watch more sunrises, things like that.
Yeah.
Observe certain things. Observe the birds that are out there. So I
Yeah.
think this is a book that adults could actually learn from. I know I'm learning from it just from reading it today. So
Good.
so that's a wonderful story. It comes from basically you and your son in the car and observing things. Would you like to give the listener a feel on a few of the pages so that way they have a feel about the
Absolutely.
book? Is called Good One God by Stacy Leicht, and it can be purchased on Barnes and Noble as well as Amazon. So it's available. It's available out there. I purchased it on Amazon because I'm just comfortable on Amazon.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it begins with the picture where Kelsey is looking out the window and an old truck is coming in the driveway. Kelsey jumped up and down. "Granddad's here." And she's waving to Granddad. "Who's ready to catch a big fish today?" "I'm ready," Zach called. "Me too," Kelsey said. It was Kelsey's first time fishing with Granddad and Zach out in the bay. She couldn't wait. "Buckle up," Granddad said. Now I'm telling you about the illustration. They're getting into the boat and Granddad's putting the cooler and the fishing poles in. Granddad headed away from the dock. The putt, putt, putt of the motor made Kelsey giggle. All around, cattails swayed in the breeze. There's a beautiful heron nearby.
Beautiful. Yes. What a gorgeous picture. The colors are all different, multicolored illustrations, and they spread across both pages. And you have a nice sized book as well. So it's a perfect book for kids.
Thank you. A great blue heron squawked and ruffled her feathers at them. "I think she's wishing us well on our fishing adventure," Granddad said. "Good one, God." "What do you mean, Granddad?" Kelsey asked. "Well," Granddad said, "everything God has made is good, and today we're seeing some of his best work." Kelsey looked around. She wanted to say "Good one, God," too, just like Granddad. The boat stopped. Granddad baited their hooks with juicy pieces of squid. "Here you go," he said. Watch your bobber, and when it goes under, give it a good yank. A family of diamondback terrapin turtles were lined up on a log, taking a morning nap.
There's pictures of the turtles, gorgeous as well. So
Yeah, those
this
very
is
detailed. I love those turtles.
yes, and I think on the next page you see a real big close-up of one of the turtles. The details, as you mentioned, this is beautiful.
Mhm.
So
Zach reached out. They feel bumpy. Those bumps are bony plates that cover the soft part of the turtle's body to keep it safe from harm, Granddad explained. That was something to praise God for. But before Kelsey could open her mouth, Zach said, "Good one, God." Kelsey slumped. Zach had beat her to it. So now you've got an idea of what keeps happening.
right, so we don't want to give away the rest of the story, but it appears that Zach has beaten Kelsey to the punch of saying Grandpa's favorite saying, "Good one, God." So, as we mentioned, it was the illustrator is Jessica Harkey, and
Yes.
this book is available on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble as well. And I said it's a nice size book for kids. The illustrations are big and they spread across both pages, which is very nice. It's a nice, comfortable feeling to reading this book. So let's also talk about you're also going to write a novel, a suspense novel. To me, this is very interesting as well, since I'm a novelist as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so the novel is completed, but we're in the editing phase at this point. And because I've been a teacher for such a long time, this book, although it's written in fiction format, it's based on true events that happened to me when I had a stalker at one point. So the title of the story is Dear Teacher, I'm Watching You. And that's the
right.
title.
Okay, so this is obviously a lot different than writing a
Very
children's.
different.
Right.
Changing gears.
Yeah, there's a big difference between writing a novel, especially something
Yes.
that touches home, like it did for you. My first novel was semi-autobiographical as well, and I think that's what we draw from is our experiences. So when you were being stalked, obviously this was a scary situation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, a lot of fear involved.
yeah, did you feel it was a therapeutic experience for you to write this book, or was it something that you just had to get it out of your system and, tell your story?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. And as a Christian writer, the idea behind being a Christian writer is always that there's a message behind my writing, or I hope that there's a message that the reader takes away. And in my story, my suspense novel, obviously I want it to be intriguing. And although there's truth to it, and I know that when I've told this story before, people are on the edge of their seat. So I know that there is a lot that would make it a very interesting book. But the reality was that I went through a lot of fear during that time and didn't lean on God during that time, and found myself leaning on the human world and other humans and man-made things such as alarm systems and things like that to try to take my fear away, when in reality I should have been on my knees praying over it. And so it took some conversation with my pastor one day for him to say, you need to spend some time praying about this, and God will take some of those fears away. But and he did, and it took some time. But I was in such a panic mode, and so fear driven, because not only was the parents stalking me, but they had also towards the end started following my son who was in high school, following him to school, following him in the car and things like that. So, you begin to fear for their life. What are they going to do something to your child? And, that's kind of the catalyst for towards the end of the novel where it gets a little bit, more intriguing because that's the cherry on the top of the cake. When they start going after your kid, you're like, I'm done.
Yeah, that's a no.
Yeah, I'm done. So
that's crossing the line. Well, first of all, it's crossing the line just to stalk you.
Yeah.
and it's crossing an emotional line, because if I know that
Yes.
somebody was stalking my kids, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I take things into my own hands.
Yeah.
I don't believe
Yeah.
in violence, but you know what? If somebody's gonna mess with my kids, I punch them out.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
so that's where that fear comes in, because you can't control other people.
yeah,
And so that's where, I was leaning towards things that were not they weren't taking away my fear. I was just grasping at straws and felt like I wasn't gaining control of anything in my life at that point. And so anyway, the book, in my opinion, is a way, hopefully, for people that may be going through a time in their life who are feeling fear, to also say, that they can resolve whatever fear they may be going through as something even as horrendous as this, that if they get on their knees and pray, God will help them get through their fear.
So this was a pretty emotional book to write.
Yeah.
So you've written now a children's book, you've done a novel. Obviously, the length of the book between a novel and a children's book is quite different.
Yeah.
My next book is 320 pages as opposed to a 32-page children's book. So there's a big difference. Besides the length of the book, what were some of the other big differences that you found writing a novel as opposed to a children's book?
Oh, goodness. Well, the amount of planning that has to go into a novel is just incredible, honestly. You have to map out a novel. You have to map out characters. You have to map out, especially when you're doing something like your type of novel and my type of novel, where like for suspense, you have to leave little itty bitty, breadcrumbs along the way, so you don't give away what's going to happen, but you have to leave little bitty breadcrumbs. So you have to find a way to weave those in without giving it away. So there's a lot of little things that people may not realize that you have to do in order to make that fun and exciting for the reader.
Right.
That take work, that take a lot of work, which I would imagine your novel does as well.
Yeah, a lot of revisions. I'm a type of person that writes in a notebook first. I think I'm one of the few that still does that. But I write in a notebook and then I transcribe it to the computer. That's the first edits. But then I have a personal editor and then we have a publishing editor. So it goes through the editing process probably 10 to 15 times. I'm sure that the editing process is obviously more extensive than writing a children's book.
Yeah, I still went through the editing process a few times, but it was more about what would you think if we did this, not versus like grammar or spelling or things like that. But most of it was very minute things, because my children's book, I think, has like 750 words or something like that. So 750 versus, I think, like 78,000 is a very different ball game.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. Because the editing, obviously, on a 78,000 work is going to be extensive and deeper and all that. And, have you found, this is what I found, like when I first started writing my second novel, you learn these things as you go along, is that reading it out loud. I have a person that I read it out loud to, and I catch a lot of edits that way and everything.
Yes.
So there's like all sorts of ways that as you go along, you start becoming better and better at what you do. I thought my second book was so much better than the first book. So.
Yeah. And I also have a friend that's an excellent, person of the English language. I don't think she has a degree in English or not, but I use her as my beta reader. So I'll do a few chapters at a time and send them to her, and she'll send something back. And if something isn't clear, we'll call and go through them on Zoom or on the phone and literally go, sentence by sentence together. And she'll say, you need a comma here, or your quotes were a little funky here, or whatever. But, when you get into writing, and I map things out, but then I type it on the computer. So when I'm really cruising through typing, sometimes I don't catch all my errors.
Oh, yeah, that's
So,
okay. Yeah,
oh yeah, oh
yeah.
yeah.
Just go, keep
Yeah.
going, keep going.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
That's what I tell my students. Just keep writing.
yeah. Just put something down. I always hear people
Absolutely.
saying, "Well, I need to write my book." I say, "You don't have to write that much. Write a page or two a day." And then I said, by the
Yes.
time you get to the second month, you're going to be really interested in what you're doing, and you never know where the story's going to take you. But it's just the
Mhm.
consistency that you have to have. Some people have it better than others. I should
Yeah.
be a lot more consistent than I have been, but that's sometimes I get sidetracked with other things. But
Mhm.
that's so that this is a novel I certainly want to read next year. Do you have like a time frame? Mine is in the spring. When is yours coming out?
I don't know the exact date, but I will definitely keep you abreast of the situation. I know I have to have everything finalized
Mhm.
to my publisher by January 15th. And then he thought it would just be a few months after that before it would come out. So I would imagine probably March, April-ish is my thinking, but yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Great. And of course, you have this wonderful book, Good One God, by
Mhm.
Stacy Light. And the illustrator is Jessica Harkey. And I highly recommend it because, for me as an adult, it sort of like smacked me right in the heart here, saying, I'm sitting here in Florida, and I got beaches on both sides of me. I'm in Central Florida, so I can go one side or the other, not too very easily. And I haven't gone to see a sunrise yet. Well, then I was in Clearwater for a couple of days, but I was busy and everything like that. You get busy, you get sidetracked with business stuff and everything. But I don't. It's taking the time. I think I'm going to do that next time I go out on a trip when I go see friends and I take the back roads of Florida and just look at the orange trees and everything and the cows and the goats and everything. But you see a lot of farms in Florida,
Yeah.
back roads, especially in old Florida, what they call old Florida. So I'm just
Yeah.
starting to learn about Florida a little bit like that. So this is a tremendous book. I highly recommend it. Parents should read it with their kids as well. Good One God. It's really you would uh, appreciate the beauty that's around you. That's
Thank you.
yeah. So you have another book planned beyond this? Is there a sequel to this, or is there a book that you haven't?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have written the follow-up book to Good One God called Great One God.
Oh, great, great. I
Yes.
like that.
Yes. So it will be Good One God and then Great One God. Um, and then I believe it will be if we keep it the same, and it's not all completely done, but Grandma will be taking the kids to the zoo. So the kids will still be the main characters, but it will be Grandma this time taking the kids to the zoo with a different life lesson, but um, still some of the main characters.
Wow, wonderful. I saw you dedicated also the book to your mom and dad. And
Yeah, they're just amazing people, and they just always put their Christian life and other people first, and they're just incredibly loving people. So I definitely wanted them to have something in writing that showed just a hint of how much I appreciated their love towards me growing up, but it just gives them some memories to look back on with the kids, and they are enjoying looking at it.
that's wonderful that they're still here and they can enjoy it. And now you got
Yeah, they're
now you
really
got
enjoying it.
yeah, now you got your mom in this now too, which is nice as well.
Yes,
So
yes, we're
equal
having a book
equal
signing
praise.
December 2nd, so
Oh,
they'll
you
be
are.
there. Yes,
Oh, okay. And then where's the book signing?
the book signing is at Amoroso's Bakery, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina, and
What a
so we've
great
had
place to
quite a
have a book signing, a bakery. Yummy.
yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
They are making treats to match the theme of the book, which is adorable. They're going to have, cupcakes and cookies that have the theme of the book. So I'm not sure if there will be little herons or turtles, but they have told me everything will look like the book. So I can't wait to see what the treats look like.
Oh, that's
Uh,
great.
yes,
You'll have to take some pictures and send it to us, please. These-
I will. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
super excited. But my mom and dad will be there, and Jessica Harkey, my illustrator, will be there, and
Nice.
I'm
Very
sure it'll
nice.
be a fun night. We're looking forward to it.
Well, congratulations on a wonderful book. It's a wonderful message.
Thank
And
you.
it certainly made me think as an adult, thinking, what am I doing here, sitting behind a computer all day long? Get out there and enjoy the beautiful world that God has given us, for sure. So
Yes.
Stacy Light, thank you for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids. We
Thanks
appreciate
for
you.
having me.
And this
Thank you.
this podcast is free. It's on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, as well as our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. Join us for another edition of Magical Books for Kids next week. I'm Michael John Sullivan. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.
For me to be here. So I better take advantage of the days. And it's sort of like what you said, is that if it wasn't for him, and if you didn't survive those incredible journeys and challenges, that you wouldn't be here. It's very, very interesting.
And I'll have to say, like, it's not unlike many immigrant immigrant stories, right? I mean, I don't write this as an immigrant story, but technically he was an illegal immigrant, right? I mean, other people in my family came through, the regular way,
Ellis Island, that's what
like came through Boston, actually, more the, upper Massachusetts kind of thing.
Right.
But like so many crazy things could have happened to him. And he was so lucky.
Right.
So lucky. And many immigrants have some very similar harrowing tales.
No, absolutely. Look at the people coming from a place like Cuba, right? When they come in a boat or anything, they deal with the treacherous waters. Even though it's not far.
Very dangerous. That's a very dangerous the area of water with those currents, et cetera. And even the people crossing, from South America coming up Mexico. I mean, even today we see some incredible stories of survival and all of that.
Yeah.
But it's so, to me, I feel like that sense of responsibility that I really want it to be, and I want it to spark a love of history and an interest in history. And when I was a kid, if my science class was all about a leaf, I would get like 100 on every single test because I could hyper focus on the leaf and learn everything about the leaf. But if the subject was really broad, I had a lot of trouble like memorizing all of that and learning it from this big global perspective. So I guess I'm more of like a micro person.
Right. You give more attention to the little details as opposed to the little details.
So I'm thinking, like, if this gives kids like this nautical piece of history that they may not have otherwise been interested in or known about or learned about, and it sparks a little bit about learning about the age of sail and how did we chart those currents? How did these boats navigate? No radar. No,
exactly. There's no GPS on your cell phone then.
That's right. Yeah. So and again, like I created a teacher guide for both books.
Oh, that's great.
Which just gives across like several different subject matter, some ideas for essays or research projects or engineering projects or climate change stuff or, whatever. And one of the things I came up with was who helped us map the currents of our oceans. And certainly in the Atlantic Ocean, it would be Benjamin Franklin, right? So if not for his love of science and figuring things out, right? He also gave us the library.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things he gave, including spectacles, eyeglasses. Yeah, there was a lot of things he did.
And I'm a huge fan of the library. My local library helped me tremendously getting my research books. So I'm
the librarians and the libraries are treasures. I consider them treasures. So we want to make sure they stay around for sure. So we are talking to Marguerite Maitland. She's written a series of books Runaway at Sea and Adventure at Sea, and there's another book coming out next year. How do people find this? They can find it on Amazon. There's a particular website.
I'm trying to also direct people to the Barnes and Noble too, because I'm trying to get the attention of Barnes and Noble. So
Well, exactly. You want to help all the bookstores.
Yeah, I am trying to get it picked up to actually be carried in the book, so in the stores, but it is online at Barnes and Noble. It's also on Amazon. I'm hoping now that things are opened up to do more book signings, at least like locally on Long Island.
Right.
And you can go to the Runaway at Sea, all like smushed together, runawayatsea.com. And, both links to the books, the synopsis of the books, my creative writing workshop is on there. Any author events are on there. Some videos from previous appearances are on there. So there's a lot of information on that website. So you can get a lot of stuff. And if you're a teacher or a librarian and you're interested in doing a program or a book signing or whatever, there's a form in the purchase tab to fill out. And that note comes to me, it comes to my publisher. So if you're interested in doing that, I just did a couple of weeks ago 3 Zoom sessions for 3 7th grade classes in Arizona.
Wonderful. See how we can reach people everywhere now.
It's nice. Really amazing, right? Yeah. So and these kids loved my book. Mm-hmm. They had so many thoughtful questions. The teacher built a whole curriculum around my book. Mm-hmm. And the kids created their own books and talked about point of view and story arc. And, it was a creative writing project for them. So it was a really incredible experience for me to have these 7th graders, boys and girls, like right. It was not like one or the other. It was both of them very engaged in the story, asking all kinds of questions, very thoughtful, very insightful. It was really an a very rewarding experience for me. So I could certainly do that anywhere, right? Like,
sure, so, exactly. That's what Zoom is for, right? And all these different digital technical things we have. So, well, we have to have you back when your next book comes out next spring. So
I would love that. That would be fantastic. So this was great. I really appreciate, you inviting me on the show. This has been a great chit chat about writing and
more to come. More to come. So we continue to do this every week. So I want to thank you for joining us here for Magical Books for Kids. And I do want to let people know, the listeners, and we are gathering an audience. I think this is going to be the first month we actually had over 1,000 downloads.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we're very happy. We're very happy about that. So you can hear it on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, as well as our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. And thank you again for joining us. And please join us again for another free edition of Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.